Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Sunday evening to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there and have had yourselves a fine weekend. Certainly my first time joining you all this weekend. As for you folks who did not know, went on a little getaway with me and my family. We went to North Georgia in a town called Helen, which a lot of people in the Southeast are probably familiar with, but it's a little German-themed town, and it's a really cool place to go to. We certainly enjoyed it, but I'm certainly glad to be back home and back to a normal flow of things. So appreciate you folks understanding, which I'm sure most do understand. People like to take vacations. But it's good to be back, and we're here to give you a pretty long video. We're going to flow through it nice and slow because I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, and there's probably going to be some hiccups here and there with just speaking and twisting some words up. So we'll try to flow through this as well as we can. But there's going to be many topics in this video. The first is going to be talking about the tropics. We'll talk about the tropics twice. Run the beginning of the video and then one towards the end. There's an area of interest out there that has a 10% chance to develop. So there's a good chance it's not going to develop at all. But we'll talk about why, and then we'll talk about an area around your Memorial Day weekend, that could cause some issues if you're heading to the beach, things like that. Not talking about a hurricane or anything like that. Not talking about Arlene already, which is the first name out the hurricane list, but we certainly need to discuss it. And then in between that, we'll discuss a severe weather threat throughout the rest of the week, and then talk a little bit more specifically more detailed on for tomorrow. And then we'll talk about also the summer that just really won't get going here in the eastern U.S. Even in the southeast, it has not been hot yet. It really has not. So we're going to break all this down for you folks. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below so I can do that. I can pray over it, and then others can do so too. So let's get rolling. A lot to discuss here. We'll start off by looking at the satellite view of what's going on. You have a cold front digging down in the eastern U.S. This is really bogged down in South Carolina, Georgia, and in fact, it's really stalled out right over my area. And the forecast kind of got busted today here in the Midlands of South Carolina, where we just have never really shook the rain. I was hoping I was going to get outside after getting home this afternoon, earlier this morning, and do maybe a little yard work, but it has just been showery and drizzly all day. But this cold front coming in is actually influencing this area out here. If you look at the far corner of your screen, there's a little spin, and we're about to talk about that. But outside of that, there's really clear conditions over the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, and that's because you're under the influence of troughing. So you got dry, cooler, spring-like stable air in place where there's really no moisture or anything like that. But we'll give you the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. Gotta start getting to the point where I don't say Storm Prediction Center. I gotta say both, because we are now getting not deeper, but we're firmly starting to get closer into the full of hurricane season. The more we get deeper in the summer, the more we'll talk about the tropics, and then eventually we'll get into late summer, and then that'll probably be a huge topic, even in what is forecasted to be a below average hurricane season. But that doesn't mean we're not going to get one or two big hurricanes, because we certainly could. But let's talk about what's going on right now. We have a 10% risk of this little thing to develop out here. And I say little, but it's it even says it, a broad low is producing a large area of disturbed weather a couple hundred miles northeast of the Bahamas. So this is producing probably some big time swells out here, a lot of showers and storms, and I'm about to show you a better view of it here in a second, but it actually has that look of the beginning origins of a tropical system. It really does, but it's not forecast to develop as between really what's going on right now in the next 24 to 48 hours. It's really going to get messed up with wind shear, which we'll talk about that here in a second. But let's actually get an image on this where we have movement so we can actually really see what's going on. But in the low levels of the atmosphere, I'm talking about, between the actual surface where you're standing, not like you can stand on the ocean, but the surface is, the actual where the surface of the ocean is, and several thousand feet up, you actually have a spin, a little low-level spin going on right in this region. If you look really hard enough, you can actually see the spin ongoing. You go maybe another 5,000 feet up, you got winds coming in at another direction, which if you actually look right here, you see these clouds moving from west to east. They're moving in this general direction right here. I wish I had my cursor up. I can draw arrows and stuff. That is the difference, the changing in direction with speed, with winds, with height. So that is wind shear. So tropical systems do not like that. Okay, so you got the spin right at the low levels, right? But then if you go another several thousand feet up in the atmosphere, the winds are screaming out the west and moving east. So that's why you're seeing kind of all these outer bands, if you will, the outer flow of the northern end of this huge area kind of getting pushed off this way. You see how all these clouds are kind of moving like that, screaming over Bermuda. I was about to call it Jamaica up here, but Bermuda. That is the wind shear already affecting this storm greatly. So that is why this is not going to develop, even though it's going to flirt with the Gulf Stream out here. So this is kind of what's going on. But if you look at kind of the low-level winds, you can see it well here. This is an awesome free site, guys, for hurricane season. It's called, just type in Zoom Earth. It is awesome. I love it. But at the surface, I mean, you can see the circulation. You see how it's spinning here? This is winds at the surface. Even a few thousand feet up, the winds are coming in this direction. But as they get higher up, then you get winds that are actually moving in this direction. I really wish I had my cursor up to not just moving the mouse around. But anyway, so you have a general spin right here. You got winds coming out the west, southwest, south, southeast. You get what I'm saying. There's a spin out here. So we'll see what happens with this. 10% chance, so not a 0, but it's a pretty low chance. Another way you can look at this is another great site. Hopefully, maybe I can link this site below this video here in a second, but after I'm done. But this is a great way to look at it if you don't know kind of when I'm all the weather terms and things like that. Anything you see in the red lines, that's unfavorable conditions for tropical development. The yellow lines, that's just kind of in between favorable and unfavorable, so kind of a medium, if you will. The green is a favorable chance. The only reason when you have this green right here is because it's right there where the actual system is. So it's it's creating its own spin in the atmosphere. But you get north of this, you get in all directions of this, you get wind shear, which is the changing in directions with speeds, with height, or even the changing of speed with the winds with height. That's shear. So directional shear, speed shear, yeah. Okay. Trust me, when we get a little bit deeper into the tropics, I'll be able to explain this a lot better for you guys. Kind of like severe weather season. The tropics is its own beast, and I always try to explain what goes into it instead of just throwing a graphic on here and say, hey, there's a tropical storm right here. But this is another great way to look at it. This is winds at 850 millibars, which is equivalent to around 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. So if you look at this, okay, you see the wind barbs. You see if the wind barb, at the end of the wind barb, is facing this, at the end of this flag kind of arrow is facing down, that means winds are coming out the south. Winds are coming out south, southeast, east, northeast, north. So you see the spin. This is winds at around 5, about a mile in the atmosphere, 5,000 feet up in the atmosphere. So it's even influencing the winds way away from this center of circulation, if you will. As you can tell, it's creating a little spin way out of here, hundreds of miles to the north and northeast. I'm sorry, northwest and west. But once you get a little bit closer over here, okay, you got more of the wind direction being influenced by troughing. Okay, so you go to winds at 700 millibars, right? Okay, this is about 10,000 feet up in the air. So what I just showed you was 5,000. This is 10,000 feet up in the air. So you still got it being influenced around the circulation, obviously. Around the immediate circulation, you still got to spin, even at 10,000 feet up in the air. But now if you look over here, you got light winds coming straight out the west at about 10,000 feet up in the air. So this is now influencing this circulation, where at about 5,000 feet, these winds were kind of coming out of the northeast. Now they're coming out the northwest, another 5,000 feet up in the air. So the wind direction changes with height. It's wind shear. Tropical systems don't like that. And I promise you, I'm not going to get super nerdy with you guys in every discussion talking about the tropics, but it's going to mean a lot when we get deeper into hurricane season, when we're really discussing a real threat. This is not a threat. But So we'll switch courses. This is forecast to continue to move on out and then head off to the northeast and not be a bother at all. Okay, even if it was heading right towards us, which it couldn't because there's a trough, there's a cold front, which cold fronts influences the directional pull of tropical systems, which is a whole nother beast to discuss. It still would not form. But let's talk about the severe weather threat for tomorrow. So tomorrow, you got 3 areas to watch. One, you got a marginal risk in Montana. One down here would just, basically, this is just going to be prefrontal activity where you have a moist atmosphere, some damaging winds as possible, and some small hail. But right here, you now have a slight risk of severe storms. So that's a level 2 out of 5. This upgraded earlier this afternoon. This is a 2% risk of a tornado right over Lubbock and Amarillo. Then winds, a 15% risk of winds pushing 50 knots or higher within 25 miles at any given point. That's 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then you get the 15% chance of 1 inch in diameter or larger hail in this yellow area. Okay, let's talk about how this can unfold tomorrow. We'll start off tomorrow morning. And pretty quiet start, but then bang. This area has been pretty active over the last several days. But storms will really get going. Let's bump this back up. Storms will really get going, I would say, as early as probably early to mid-afternoon in eastern New Mexico. And then as we get into later in the afternoon to the evening, widespread showers and storms from Midland, Texas, Southwest Texas, Midland, Texas, Lubbock, all the way up to Amarillo. Highest tornado threat will be right up here with a little surface piece of energy flying through right up here. And then there could be some storms in western Oklahoma. These storms could be anywhere, right in this region. And then maybe as you get later into the evening, this could evolve into more of a kind of congealed area storms from western Oklahoma stretching all the way down and maybe reaching all the way to Abilene eventually. But this starts to get more so in west central Texas. And then I think this will eventually die out with the loss of daytime heating. And by the time we get to the wee hours of the morning, to daybreak Tuesday morning, you might just be left with some lingering showers and storms in Oklahoma City, maybe all as far south as down to the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So just be careful in western Texas, western panhandle, the panhandle of Oklahoma, and even areas of far eastern New Mexico tomorrow for some severe weather. We'll get into Tuesday, same kind of area, but a little bit further east. Right now, just a marginal risk of severe weather. Same kind of deal. It's being influenced by this little upper low, or little, basically a southern stream piece of energy that has no real directional pull down here. And we'll talk about this here in a second. But this is helping, it's a little spin, and it's helping to pull higher dew points, higher moisture, all the way into the southern and central, even up into the northern plains. So this will probably be the area to watch over the next several days for severe weather, right into here, right in a favorable area if you're a storm chaser. And it's favorable area too because not as many higher elevations are being impacted with it being right here in the plains. If it was more so in this region, more higher impact areas would be in place. But consistent troughing, I think, is eventually going to dry us out in South Carolina, for example, North Georgia, where it's been very rainy this weekend. A lot more rainfall than I thought was going to fall. That's why you see this weird little kind of dip right here. In this entire area, dry, stable air. But you go on and move to day 4 through day 8. All of it says predictability too low. But if you go down here and read the discussion, okay, it basically talks about a southern stream shortwave trough and how it could move eventually over the plains and could influence wherever the location is for severe weather. And really what that is if you watch here on your screen, you'll see an area of blue that pops off the Euro. And right there, see it right over California? This is like a little trough of low pressure, like an upper low right here. And winds are kind of going around this like this. And this is influencing many, many levels of the atmosphere and actually helping to pull low-level moisture all the way up into the plains. And this is creating day after day environment of severe weather. Now, with the placement way over here, even as we get into Thursday, we get into Friday, unless this really ejects across the plains, you're not going to have really a significant day of severe weather. If this eventually, right here, ejects get a little surface low that pops off. If he ejects across this region, then you could have a bigger severe weather day. And it mentions that in the Storm Prediction Center sometime this weekend. And, we just don't know if that's going to happen yet. We don't. So we'll certainly watch. But what we do know is that upper low right over here is influencing energy for severe storms. We'll start off, this is mixed layer cape, basically fuel for thunderstorms. And each day will be different, but what I can tell you is there'll be plenty of fuel to the atmosphere each day. This is getting into Wednesday afternoon. You got plenty of cape sitting in Texas all the way up into areas of eastern Colorado, areas of Nebraska. And then we get into Thursday, another area. This is extending a little bit further north now, getting all the way up into really North Dakota. And then we get into Friday, even more big pool, just more widespread pool of convective energy needed for storm development, which will be there for storm development. And then we get into Saturday, and Saturday needs to be watched. There's a lot more fuel to the atmosphere, so we need to watch for a bigger pool of low-level moisture into this region, maybe a dry line setup. I think this weekend could be an interesting last weekend of May. I think that it could be potentially a high-impact weather weekend for Memorial Day weekend. We'll see what happens here. But even when we get into Sunday, look, explosive cape. Will we have a cap in place? Not sure. This is about a week out. But, just the same areas look to be pretty active. Each day shows more energy than the next. This is getting 8 days out. So I think you're going to have a day between now and the next, maybe 5 to 10 days of at least a chance of severe weather in this region, in the southern to central plains. I definitely think it's likely. I think it's going to be quite active in this region, really to finish off May. It's just wondering and trying to figure out if there's going to be a day of very, very active weather. That's the question. Are you going to have significant severe weather, or just a day after day of like a level 1 or level 2 out of 5 kind of severe weather? So that's why we talk about. That's why we make 2-a-day videos here, and we give you a morning update every morning on the morning, because things change overnight. So let's talk about this little system that's kind of got some chatter going here in the southeast and the eastern U.S. this weekend. So we'll compare each model here. The GFS. Got some rooster hair today, guys. Sorry about that. I know y'all don't care about my hair. I care about my hair. So. But anyways, we'll keep rolling here. If you look right here, so we'll start off around Tuesday evening. We'll get this rolling. Comes a trough that swings down. Not much going on yet, but you look at this L right down here. This low pressure pops up right here. We got to watch this. What happens with this? There's going to be a lot of troughing in place. Cold front might keep this off the coast of the southeast, influence of troughing, keeps the pool well off the coast of the southeast. But, you just got a big plume of moisture right off the coast of the Carolinas. And then at the same time, this is getting into Friday afternoon. Carolinas looks safe. You got an upper level low, a cutoff low, upper level low feature swinging down out of Ontario into the northeast. This is what happened with Sandy. I'm not saying we're going to have another Sandy. That's not what I'm saying. But this is kind of what happened. You had a cutoff upper level low feature that swung down to the mid-Atlantic northeast. And what happens here is the wind pattern is going like this around this feature. This little blue lined area, that's like a cutoff low. So this actually helps pull this back into the northeast. And it does that. It pulls it right back into southern New England and creates an absolute washout for the northeast for Saturday into Sunday potentially. Okay? So first off, is this going to develop in any kind of tropical, subtropical, hybrid type system? We're not sure. The European kind of shows the same scenario. We get into Thursday, big blob of moisture. Now I can tell you with the European, you get a lot bigger of a moisture push into the eastern Carolinas. This would create potentially a washout Friday afternoon. All really depends on the timing of some kind of cold front that might swing down into the eastern U.S. We keep this going here. Same kind of deal. This kind of gets yanked into the mid-Atlantic, into the Delmarva area, this low pressure. sometime late weekend, sometime Saturday into Sunday maybe. But it's tough. This is a tough one to figure out. Canadian, big blob of moisture right down here. You see the low pressure popping up here? But with the Canadian here, which tends to sometimes create a little bit stronger of scenarios, but not always. Canadian doesn't do terrible with the tropics. In fact, I would argue the Canadian might have did better last year. But anyways, Canadian for, Sunday night into next Monday morning has an all-out tropical storm just about off the coast of North Carolina. But this does not get pulled into the Northeast. This does not get captured by any kind of upper-level low influence. In fact, it just heads on off, and that's all she wrote. So we need to watch this area. This is a big question mark and needs to be watched because it's Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people, consider it. We know what it's really for, right? We should all remember that. But a lot of people consider this kind of the gateway to summer. A lot of people are outside doing outdoor activities. But I can tell you, if we move throughout the week, it's going to be very rainy for South Georgia and areas of Florida because of these stalled cold fronts. It's just that time of the year where cold fronts don't really clear Florida anymore. But we get into Saturday. We'll take it all the way through Memorial Day. A lot of rain on the Carolina coastline. A lot of rain for Florida, especially late this week. A lot of rain potential for Florida. But look how you're pretty close into this weekend to a washout for the Northeast. And it just all depends on what this low pressure does. So, there's obviously the I-95 corridor is a highly populated corridor. You need to watch this because this is certainly can influence any sort of Memorial Day weekend plans, that's for sure. So we need to definitely watch that. But the next thing and the last thing we'll talk about is a lot of people are wondering, Mitch, when is it going to warm up enough for my pools to be warm enough to swim in? And I tell you what, even here in South Carolina, if you got a pool, it's warm, but it's not as warm as it typically is this time of the year. A lot of people think this might be the coolest summer since 2017, but we need to certainly watch. I remember 2017, I feel like that was a year where we had some cold fronts, quite a few cold fronts right at the end of summer. But, 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, which runs to the 26th to the 30th. Below average temperature still predicted for the mid-Atlantic, the southeast, the south. Above average temperatures for the high plains and the plains region. But, listen, there's just no real warm air on the horizon that I'm seeing that's like screams, wow, it's hot. And one thing I always look at, and I specifically look at it in August and September, when I start getting really, really excited for fall. I'm already starting to think about football. I tell you what, when it gets to about late July for me, when it's still the dog days of summer here in South Carolina, my mind's already starting to switch to September and onward. But one thing that I look at, what you're seeing out on your screen is dew points. To me, that is the best indicator of a cold front, especially when you're in spring and you're in late summer, early fall. Because in both times of the year, you got a lot of moist air nearby. So you can see what kind of atmosphere is here more better. Behind a cold front, you got lower dew points, drier air, and cooler air. So in this case, we'll look at dew points, right? And we'll look at the central and eastern U.S. You can tell all this moist air. This is starting off tomorrow afternoon. Dew points in the 60s and 70s is very humid air. Once you get the dew points, I would say below 55 degrees, that's when you can walk outside and say, okay, there's hardly no humidity in the air. So you keep this going, guys, and if you look, you get into Tuesday, look at these lower dew points along the eastern U.S., but look at the more moist air right just south of these stalled frontal boundaries, right? You keep going. Look at the dew points. They remain low. This is that time of the year in the south where you really start to get entrenched into a very moist atmosphere, and you stay in a very moist atmosphere clear through August, okay? Besides one or two fluke cold fronts that you can occasionally get. I remember we got a fluke cold front on July 31st one time a few summers back, and it was wild. But anyways, you look at this, And look at this. I mean, as you get into mid to late week, you see another cold front. These are not temperatures. These are dew points. And it's a great way to look at things, right? And this stabilizes everything again. I mean, you got lower dew points all the way into the panhandle of Florida for your Friday. And you see this isobar that's circled. That's our little low pressure. And this makes sense because, listen, this little area right here, right? It's getting pushed this way, and that is because you have a trough coming down, a cold front. These cold fronts push these tropical systems away. And a lot of times when you get into September and October, when you have these big, huge hurricanes heading right towards the southeast coastline, a lot of times the reason why they head out to sea is because you have a big east coast clearing cold front that moves through, saves the day, and instead we get pumpkin spice latte weather instead of a hurricane. So that's kind of what happened. I'm getting off track here, but a lot of people don't realize on 9/11, September 11th, 2001, that there was a hurricane several hundred miles off the coast of New England, of New York City. And there's a lot of thoughts on if the hurricane would have obviously went through New York City in the Northeast and 9/11 wouldn't happen. But outside of all that, a lot of people, if you look at satellite imagery of 9/11, there's a huge hurricane right off the coast out here. And if you remember, on 9/11, it was crystal blue skies. And that is because a cold front had pushed through. And when a cold front pushes through, clears out the atmosphere and there's no clouds. Mostly no clouds. But, just an interesting off-topic, discussion there. But that's what happens here. So big cold front keeps it dry, keeps it stable, keeps the evenings crisp, keeps the mornings cooler, comfortable. And I mean, this continues all through. It might just be a nice Memorial Day weekend. It really would. Dry air across the Ohio Valley, the eastern U.S. But it potentially could be, even though you got dry air, you could still get rain. It just could be a cool rain. There's so much that goes into this, guys. You get wet bulb temperatures, things like that. But anyways, there's a chance that along the I-95 corridor it could be quite rainy. We have to see what happens. But this continues, guys. And eventually, as we get about 10 days out, the atmosphere looks like it might be replaced by by much more moist air, more of a typical late spring, early summer kind of flow. But, you look at temperatures in response to this dry air. The more drier air, the lower the dew points, the lower the temperatures will be, especially at night. And you look at high temperatures tomorrow, just 70s and 80s. Now, you're very uncomfortable in central and southern Florida where the cold front hasn't cleared. But, I mean, just 70s and 80s. I mean, you get into Tuesday, cooler air, 70s and 80s. Same deal for Wednesday. Wednesday, these are temperatures in these regions. Warm it up. I mean, it's cooler in the southeast than it is Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Iowa. And then you get a bigger cold front late week, and it drops you back down to the 60s and 70s for highs up here in the Ohio Valley, places like the Mid-Atlantic. I mean, and these are highs for Friday, guys. Maybe only the 70s for highs in the Carolinas to Atlanta. Virginia, certainly only 70s for highs. And, I mean, we just can't shake these cold fronts, which I'm telling you, I'm not a big summer fan. I enjoy the first part of summer, but then after you get to the 4th of July and afterwards, I'm over it. You can go on and skip the rest of summer for all I care. But, it's inevitable. The heat's going to come, but the longer we delay it, the better. And then we get into this weekend, and we just got to see what happens. But it certainly is interesting going forward here. And, we look at, same kind of temperatures up here. And, I mean, it's about the same, guys. I mean, high temperatures for Thursday in the Northeast could be downright chilly for certain areas, 50s and 60s for highs. So that's all I got, guys. Hope that came in clear. Nice 30-minute video to kick off the week this week. But we'll keep you guys updated. There's a lot of small to medium topics to talk about, and we'll continue to do that. So God bless all y'all. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you in the morning.